In the mountain bike world, there are a few riders that like to keep things very minimalistic. We're talking about rigid frames, rigid forks, V-brakes, and single speed. Now, single speed got me thinking. Could an e-mountain bike be set up a little bit more minimalistic? Could we get rid of the cassette and the shifter and the derailleur and set it up single speed? One of the downsides of owning an e-mountain bike is the amount of cassettes and chains you get through. So how would it handle a single speed setup? Would it be slower? Would it be faster? Would it change the way it rode? Time to find out. So we've come here to Rogate Bike Park with my trusty Canyon Spectral on. We've got two setups for today's ride in. We've got a single speed setup and a rear wheel with a full cassette and derailleur I'm going to put on my bike. So two different setups head to head to find out the negatives and the positives about running single speed versus gears. So there's some really important factors to consider if you're thinking about setting your e-mountain bike up single speed. Now, if you go too big or too small on the gear ratio, then it's really going to become a problem. If you go too big, then you're going to struggle getting up the hill climbs. If you go too small, then you're going to be spinning out on the flat and downhill sections. So I did a little bit of research. They suggested a 32-tooth chainring with an 18-tooth sprocket on the rear was going to be the best of both worlds for climbing and descending. You also need to think about chain tension, and if you're running a full suspension bike, you need to get a sprung-loaded tensioner to allow for chain growth. But if you're on a hardtail, you can stick a rigid chain tensioner in there. So there's a few disadvantages of going single speed on your e-mountain bike. You're going to lose the extreme ranges of your cassette, so you're going to lose your easiest climbing gear for going uphill, and you're going to lose that hardest gear for smashing it out on downhill sections or going on the road. Your motor is also going to be put under a lot more stress on those climbs. You're probably going to have to use those higher assist levels. Your battery, if you are using those higher assist levels, well, you're going to lose range and use a lot more power from that battery. So there are a few advantages too. Removing your cassette and your derailleur off the back of your bike, it's going to lose a few grams. You're going to replace it with that single speed cog. Also, it's going to be quieter in use. You're not going to have that derailleur slapping around in the long chain, making a lot of noise. And parts could last longer too. You haven't got a chain that's constantly being moved up and down your cassette, and meaning that a chain's going to get bent and twisted as it changes gear. And also you haven't got a cassette that's going to get worn and wear out your chain. You've got one single speed chain going in a direct line, and hopefully, I think that's going to last a lot longer and be cheaper to maintain. But enough chat, let's get on the trail and see what difference it really makes. Right, the first challenge is going to be a downhill test. Now we're here at Rogate Bike Park and I've picked the L plate downhill track heading into mainline. Now this track is quite flat and pedally at the start. It drops into a few jumps and the bottom is quite gravity fed too. So you should see some interesting times here. First up, I'm going to hit it on my bike with the gears, then the single speed bike. Let's go. Right, so I'm on the geared bike, just about to drop in on L plate. Let's go. Right, so there's a time on the geared bike coming down that flat pedally section. It's still quite hard, even on the geared bike, because you're working above the limiter, but did that run in 1 minute 17. And it's nice having that spread of gears. You needed it a few times, especially off the fire road. Putting those hard cranks in definitely made a difference. Right, and a few more stats. Looking at my Garmin, we had an average speed of 14.25 mile an hour and a maximum speed of 21.79. I think a lot of that time is actually going to be made up on that flat pedally section, and the single speed bike, I think, is going to be spinning out along there. So I think it's going to be slower. Time to find out. I'm not too sure how the single speed setup is going to work. The top bit's quite flat, so I might be spinning out a little bit and probably not getting a lot of speed, but maybe make that time up later. Time to find out. Whoa, right, stop the clock. Whoa, 2 seconds slower on the single speed bike, but I think I definitely lost a lot of that speed at the top section of the downhill because it's really flat, really pedally, and I was just spinning along. I just couldn't drive the bike forward, whereas on the geared bike, I could change into that harder gear and push really hard and get more speed along the flat. I did notice on the single speed though, it did feel quite lightweight, and I could feel quite good acceleration out some of those turns too, but 2 seconds slower on that section of track. Right, it's time for the fire road sprint test. Now this is where we should see a big difference between the bike. The geared bike has got the harder gear, meaning it should maintain a higher speed. With a single speed bike, well, that's got quite an easy gear, so it's probably going to spin out and not drive us down here as fast. So it's time to see which bike gets the max speed down this fire road. So that's the fire road sprint test just done on the geared bike. Now it was really useful having that big range of gears, meaning that I could start off in an easy gear, sprint and work my way down to that hardest gear, meaning I could really push on. Now I managed to hit a speed of 21.92 miles per hour on the geared bike. So let's try that on the single speed. Okay, we're on the single speed bike this time, so let's see how fast this bike can go down this road. Right, boost mode engaged, let's do it. Oh. Now that was definitely very spinny. I was way above the limiter straight away. First few pedal strokes, the bike come up to speed really quick, but then the cadence is just super quick and you just can't accelerate any faster. But the clock says 22.94 miles an hour, so it's actually faster somehow. So the results from that sprint test have really surprised me. I would have thought that with that full cassette on my bike, with that 10-tooth harder gear, it would have walked all over the single speed setup. But then it's got me thinking, maybe the single speed, you can get on that power straight away. You're not backing off, changing gear and working your way down that cassette. You start off in a hard gear and you're instantly up to speed. Then you can just focus on spinning that gear. Maybe that's the reason it was 1 mile an hour faster, but real interesting stuff. Right, we've come down the hill here at Rogate, so it's time to head these bikes up the hill. Now we're going to use the push-up track here, which is a typical kind of trail centre climb. It's a nice mellow climb with some steep sections and some technical features too. Now this is going to be interesting. Will the geared bike win with the easier gear and the motor assist, or will the single speed smash it where I have to grind that gear and push hard and therefore go maybe a little bit faster? Let's find out. So this is the start point of the push-up. Let's get it done on the geared bike. Cheers. cry. 2 minutes bang on then for the geared bike. Now, that was really good, having a big wide range of gears to get me to the top of that hill. There are some flat sections, which means I could push those harder gears and gain a bit of time. And when it steepened up, I could stay in the saddle, meaning I was getting good grip and a good efficient riding position. So it felt pretty quick at 2 minutes. Let's see what a single speed bike's capable of. Right, it's time for the single speed climbing section. Now, I'm not really looking forward to this. When I went up there on the geared bike, I used pretty much all of those gears, had a good cadence and a lot of motor assist. With this, I think I'm gonna be bogged down, possibly quite quick on the flatter sections, but as soon as it gets steep, I'm probably not even gonna get any motor assistance whatsoever. Let's give it a go. Days. I'm going to get on for this last little bit. Right, stop the clock. Now that was absolutely horrendous because I didn't have the cadence. The motor had very little motor assistance, so it's basically like riding a normal mountain bike up there. Probably the hardest gear that you've got on a heavy bike as well, so it's pretty brutal. The time there was 2 minutes 16 seconds, 16 seconds slower than the bike with the gears on, so that's pretty interesting. And I actually had to push on parts of that because I literally had no assistance from the motor, so not recommended for steep hill climbs. Whew. So should you single speed your e-mountain bikes? Well, after today's experiments, I don't think there's a lot of use, apart from maybe if you're commuting to and from work on a flat surface, you might possibly get away with it then. But when it comes to climbing on an e-mountain bike with a single speed setup, you just simply cannot get the cadence to power you to the top of the hill. You're stuck in a hard gear and simply going nowhere. Yes, it did win the sprint race, but how often do you end up going sprinting down a flat fire road? And then there was the downhill. This bike was 2 seconds slower than the fully geared bike. And again, that was down to not being able to push that harder gear on the flatter sections. So no real advantage. But I do think there is a place for single speed mountain bikes with gearbox, or a gearbox built into the frame, or less gears potentially. I think we're going the wrong way with 12 speed and possibly 13 speed cassettes. A lot of chain wear and cassettes being worn out. And again, it's very expensive. Gearbox with single speed single speed with gearbox mounted in the frame, I think is the way forward. But let us know what you guys think down in the comments box below. Give us a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe to EMBN and give us a find and a follow on social media too. Cheers for watching.